Hello, Lynn Watts here with Wyatt the Wonder Dog Books. And today I want to talk about the importance of being prepared. Um, Before I begin talking about why it's important to be prepared, what that looks like, and then some very specific strategies that you need to teach students, I want to let you know ahead of time where you can find lesson plans on this particular subject. Um, my first recommendation is the Elementary School Counselor's Book of Lesson Plans, Volume 2. There is a special lesson in here on being ready, being prepared, and the value of that for success. All right, it's called Ready, Set, Go, Building Preparedness for Success. So there's a lesson plan, of course, aligned with ASCA standards and activities that you can do, and picture books, so on. Let me also recommend the Wyatt the Wonder Dog picture book about being organized. I'm going to talk about three particular strategies in this video that you can teach students, and all three of them are in this book. So I'll say more about that in just a few minutes. But Wyatt the Wonder Dog, being organized, really, I think, is the second book I wrote. And the reason being, this was something that I taught and talked to students about all the time. So I think it's important to begin with to talk with students about what it means and what it looks like to be prepared. Because I think all the time we say things to students and then don't actually take the time to make sure they understand, like, what does that mean? We just say, you're not prepared. Why are you not prepared? But what does that mean? What does that look like? So very concrete ways that students can be prepared means bringing their materials to class, completing assignments on time, mentally preparing, that's a part of it, for transitions or other challenges that happen during the day, anticipating what comes next. And we're going to talk about that. So being prepared, there's really three things that it means. It means thinking ahead. All right, so we're going to talk about that. Organizing what you need. So organization is an important part of being prepared. And then being ready to take action when the moment comes. All right, so all three of those things are part of being prepared. And you can have one without the other, but all of them work together. So that's why I think it's important to teach all of these kinds of skills in terms of being prepared. Now, even before, this is always kind of important when you're teaching something, I think it's important to understand why some students are not prepared. And a lot of times we just get exasperated, frustrated with students who are just chronically unprepared. And we think, well, they're lazy, some other, derogatory way of looking at it. But many times it's actually a skills gap. All right. So it's not that they're lazy or don't care, although it may seem to manifest in that way. A lot of times that's a compensation for the fact that they don't really know how to do it. It's more of a skills gap. So it can mean a lot of things in that area. It might mean underdeveloped executive functioning skills, and that's going to be a mental gap. In other words, a developmental kind of experience, some of which we can teach, but some of it might also just simply be developmentally, they just haven't developed that skill. It can be poor time management. So, and it may mean lots of people don't really have a concept of time. In other words, time gets away from them and they don't kind of think ahead about time or kind of structure their time. So poor time management. It can be a lack of routine at home, which translates into a lack of routine at school. So they don't have the routines in place that help them be successful when they get to school. It can be anxiety or overwhelm. Things just seem so overwhelming, they don't even know where to start. Perhaps you've been there. It can be that they don't have a lot of modeling, which of course relates to a lack of routine elsewhere, but not a lot of modeling of organizational habit. Maybe they live in a very kind of chaotic, just barely surviving and getting by sort of environment. And it can also have something to do with transitions and not anticipating what they need for transition or really understanding how to deal with that. So I think understanding the cause helps you know how you're going to address that, whether that's individually with some counseling or whether that's a whole classroom lesson that you're going to be doing. So there are loads of benefits of being prepared. I'm not going to go through those, but I am going to link to a post in the show notes here so you can read more about that if you'd like some more background. So let's talk about some practical strategies that you can use to help students be prepared. The first one is what we might call teaching future thinking. In other words, thinking beyond what I need or what I'm doing right now in this moment. And you can do that by teaching kids to ask questions like, what will I need next? All right, what's coming up next? And then what might happen? You might phrase it like this: what might happen after this class? What might happen this afternoon? What might happen tomorrow? Or what's going to happen after the weekend? You know, whatever the time frame is. So what might happen to in some sort of time schedule? And then, of course, the question that comes right after that is, how can I get ready now? So what do I need now? Whether that is actual, materials, whether it means to complete some sort of assignment, whether it means to mentally prepare myself for this upcoming transition, whether it means to calm myself because what's coming up is going to be a little stressful or challenging. So future thinking is an important part of being prepared. And so let me just mention, because I mentioned Wyatt the Wonder Dog and being organized, there is future thinking being taught in this book. So in the book, part of what happens is because he is disorganized and, late for school, doesn't have his assignments, it's kind of typical things. His teacher says to him, tell me how you get ready to come to school in the morning. So this is future thinking, all right, in a sense, like what's going to happen next and how do you think about it and how do you prepare yourself for that? All right, so future thinking is modeling in this book. The next strategy that is also modeled in this book is using a visual checklist, all right? So once he goes through the things that he needs to do to get ready to create a morning routine, and then an evening routine is also part of that. He says, I don't know how I'm going to remember all this. And so the suggestion is that he create a visual checklist and he can check things off as he goes through. Checklists are a powerful, powerful tool. And I know that probably, as an adult, you probably have sort of some mental checklists that you use. And these are great examples to use with kids, but mental checklists that you use to prepare. For instance, my husband and I, at one point, we had this kind of mental checklist we would use before he ever left the house. And we would say, do you have your keys? He would come back if he didn't have those, but keys. Do you have your phone? Do you have your wallet? All right. The three essentials for no matter what you're going to do when you're going off somewhere. All right. We also, I really learned the power and the importance of a checklist. At one point, we had a sailboat and took a class on sailing out in the ocean, not in the lake, but in the ocean. And one of the things that I learned, which we did not have in place whenever we took our sailboat out from the marina, was to have a literal, in writing, laminated checklist for everything that you need to do before leaving the marina with the boat. And it was like, I don't know, maybe 20 or more different things, check the gas, check this, turn this on, turn this off, open this, whatever. But a literal list of what we needed to do when we left the marina. And one of the results of that class was as soon as we got out of that class and got back on our own boat, we created that checklist. We use theirs as a model. All right. So modeling is very important, but we also, practice, well, what is it we do? What is it we do? What is it we often are liable to forget to do, and make sure that was in our checklist. And then we literally, even when we got to the point that we knew what we were doing, read out loud the checklist, everything we needed to do. Now, that's a very technical and very important situation where you don't want to make a mistake because you could damage the boat or the engine or all kinds of problems. But I think it's a good example of the power of checklists and how important they are in different situations. So you can help students develop checklists for a morning routine, for an end of the day packing, for completing their homework, whatever, preparing for a test, all these kind of things. All right. The third thing I want to talk about is to practice or to build a routine and some consistency. So another thing that is modeled in here, and that actually there's an example of it in the back of the book, is how to create a schedule. And so the importance of routines for things that you're going to do over and over again, whether that's getting ready for school in the morning, taking a sailboat out of the marina, whether it's how you're going to get ready for bed in the evening, is also a very powerful strategy. So in the book, Wyatt learns how to create a schedule by thinking about what time do I need to be at school or at the bus stop or whatever, and then working backwards with all the things that need to happen to get him to that place. So building a routine and some consistency. You can talk about why that's important, how that saves time, how once you have that routine or that schedule, you don't have to think it through every day and think, what is that? What do I need to do? You've got it there. You have very clear expectations. And here's an important part. If you have a student who has trouble with transitions from home to school, from, class to PE or back or whatever, by having a structure that you can expect that transition, it really helps with confidence level, decreases anxiety, and helps make sure that they know what to expect and what is going to happen next so that they're ready for it. So those are 3 things. I have a few others mentioned in the blog post if you want to follow the link and read that on the wyattthewonderdog.com page. But again, part of the really critical skills, I think, that we can teach students that are going to be helpful, not just in school, but in life, are how to be prepared for whatever it is that they are anticipate coming up in their day at home, at school, or wherever. So as always, thanks so much for listening, and thanks for all the wonderful work that you do to help students be prepared.